I'm not going to do a long introduction. We've got a guy here tonight that I'm not going to introduce. Mr. Gary Bright.
That's a great introduction.
If you want, I can repeat the one you got last time. No?
Just take this sign, we can hold it up and all these. Want to see his little sign here? With friends like this, who needs enemies?
Get the microphone.
You can't hear me, girl, down there?
Barely.
All right. Okay, thank you, Bob. I think by this point, most of you know who I am. I think I know most of you. I've either been introduced to you or I've represented you in a deposition. For those of you that I have yet to represent, don't worry, your time is coming. The church ran afoul of the discovery magistrate, and they now have to give us 21-day notice, and they had to pay a fine, so that held them back a little bit, but I'm sure they'll get to each and every one of you at the pace at which they're going. So, when they do your deposition, I'll tell you. I remember, it doesn't seem like it was that long ago, we had a dinner down at the El Paseo restaurant. I think most of you were there, and I gave a little talk at that particular function, and I tended to joke around a little bit, because you have to understand this case has a very serious side, a very intense side, and it also has a somewhat of a humorous side. And so I spent most of my talk at the restaurant joking around, and apparently I spent too much time joking around about Harvey Haber, because after that talk, Harvey came up and he had that look on his eye that only Harvey can have. Restraint, to put it mildly. And he had indicated that I was giving everyone the wrong idea, that I was spending too much time on the humorous aspect, and that no one would take the case seriously. And that if I was ever asked to give another speech, if I would please concentrate on the issues of the case. So, anyway. Those of you that want to write to Harvey Haber, he can be reached in the country of Tibet, where he's now a part-time mountain guide. That should teach him to mess around with legal lines. In all fairness to Harvey, that's not why he is in Tibet, although I'm sure that when he hears this particular speech, that he may feel that's the only safe place to be. I thought tonight we might talk a little bit about the trademarks involved in this litigation, and how to avoid violating the church's trademarks. And so I prepared a few remarks to that effect. The first trademark I'd like to talk about is the trademark NOTS, N-O-T-S. It's an acronym, I think. David, you might have to help me out, but is that New Era Dynamics for OTs?
Close.
You get what you pay for, I guess. So the church has this concept that they hold very high and dear to them. And I couldn't understand, it seemed to me like it was pretty much a common English word, and I didn't know what the problem was. And I guess now, after going through deposition after deposition, I'm getting to have a grasp of the subject and an understanding. I think the church believes, and their attorneys now believe, that the only OTs are within the Church of Scientology. Therefore, the fact that people outside the church talk as though they were OTs, this violates their very basic principles upon which their organization is predicated. So I've talked with these people, and I'm learning as I go, and I realize that they refer to us as squirrels and suppressive persons. Two nice words, if ever I heard of them. So, faced with this situation, I have a new legal strategy that David will have to pay for, no doubt. But this is my new legal strategy on the trademark knots. What we should do is quit worrying about violating church trademarks, and we should file our own trademarks. We should trademark the term squirrel. And then we should trademark the term suppressive person. And then when the next SP declare came out, we should say, aha, violation of trademark. And sue the living hell out of them. What do you think of that, huh? So I'm working on these legal strategies. You guys keep the funds coming in, and I'll keep putting pen to paper, all right? They also trademarked the term bridge, and because David's so busy running the center, and my helpers that were supposed to assist me in the case kept leaving to do other things, it took me a long time to find out what they were talking about when they referred to the term bridge. So I offered to agree that the people at the Advanced Ability Center and their staff and their attorneys would no longer use bridges, and that we too, like the church, would use commercial aircraft for our transportation. Now, I hope that's okay with everybody. The Church of Scientology attorneys don't drive anywhere. They don't use bridges. They fly. The only bridges they see were from 35,000 feet. And since I've been following them around for the last 10 months, I think we ought to do like they do and avoid the problem. You like that one, Russ? You've got that look on your face. You're about ready to come after me or something like that. All right. The last trademark I think I'll talk about tonight is the trademark solo, which they use in conjunction with solo knots. And I think my advice on that is very, very simple. Never, ever, ever let the Church of Scientology catch you by yourself. I never will. David's not laughing right now. I think I better get on to the serious part of the case. Usually when I talk about this case, or the independent movement in general, I tend to talk about the people that were the pioneers of the movement, the people that started the whole thing. The David Mayos, the Julie Mayos, the Sarge Gerbodis, Maud Castillos, those people that dedicated their lives to the technology and spent decades in the pursuit of excellence in the technology, and then were asked to leave because of the problems of the current administration of the church. So usually I define the case in those terms, and those are clearly very realistic terms, and they mean an awful lot to me after being associated with David and his staff these many months, and now I think we're getting into years. But there's another side of this case, because I think most of you are familiar with that particular side of the case. There's another side of the case that I didn't learn about until I started traveling around all over the country, responding to these notices of deposition filed by the church. And I have learned of a side that I feel entails the very strength of the defendant's position in this case, and that is the strength of the independent movement across the country, if not worldwide. I have been to depositions from Florida to Denver to Hawaii, Los Angeles, too many times to reiterate here. And what I've discovered is that there's a commitment to this case on the part of those independents that are practicing in the field, not affiliated with David or the Advanced Ability Center, but those independent Scientology auditors that practice independently from the church that now feel that this case represents their future. And I think that is one of the most significant developments that I have witnessed since the case has started. I think the case had that unifying aspect of the independent movement that was lacking before. And let me give you a couple of examples. And by no means are these the only or the exclusive examples, but just a couple that came to mind. There's a woman sitting over here to my left in the third row, Mary Marin. And she at one time was affiliated with the Advanced Ability Center as an auditor. And then she and Frankie Friedman, who you probably are familiar with, went down to Los Angeles and they started their own practice down there where they followed their own beliefs and their own spiritual counseling techniques, and which is clearly predicated upon their training in the church and their further training at the Advanced Ability Center. And Mary got a notice of deposition, and as far as I knew, she was one of the first ones in the independent field. And I was really sort of apprehensive going into that deposition, not knowing how the independent field would consider this case, whether they would consider it as a threat, whether they would consider themselves to be intimidated by the might of the church and their attorneys and the money and the effort that they can bring to bear upon people that they feel need to be pressured or need to be coerced. And in listening to Mary for the hours and hours that she gave her testimony, I kind of sensed a truthfulness or an inner integrity that would not be compromised by the pressure of the church or the church's attorneys. And when I left that deposition, I told her, Mary, I somewhat feel like this is a turning point in this case because I think things are going to go very well from this point on. And I think those were true words when I said that, because all my observations since then have been in conformity with that belief that I had. And I feel very indebted to the people such as Mary who have put their own well-being or their own selfish interests aside to testify truthfully in this case. It would be easy to say, no, we're not doing any of these techniques, or we don't believe in this techniques, or it's something entirely different, but that's not the way she testified. She says, yes, this is what I do, this is why I do it, I believe in it, and I'm going to continue to do so. Some months after Mary Marin's deposition, the church noticed another deposition in the convenient locality of Miami, Florida, in the middle of summer. And that deposition was of a Mr. Ken Urquhart, and I called the church attorney and I said, look, I understand Ken will be coming to California in the fall. Why don't we just wait? Surely, with all the depositions you're going to take in this case, you do not need to have this one taken in the middle of the summer in Miami on fairly short notice. He said, no, absolutely, we have to go forward. And so off to Florida we went. It was myself and John Ziegel, and Ken actually had to fly down from New Jersey just to be there in Florida for his deposition. So it was a terrible inconvenience, and certainly I consider to be an unnecessary expenditure of funds, but we went. And Ken is a little different than Mary. He is an independent auditor, and he's no longer affiliated with the Advanced Ability Center, although he too was at one time affiliated with the center. But Ken, as I learned as his deposition went on and on that day in Florida, had spent many, many, many years in the church and at the highest levels of church authority. He had been in the church since the early or mid-60s, and he stayed in it until the early 80s. And during that period of time, for many years, in the late 60s and 70s up to the mid-70s, he held the post of L Ron Hubbard communicator, wherein he actually lived with L Ron Hubbard aboard the ship and later at the land locations. And he lived with that individual on a daily basis. And the reason why he continued for those many years was very clear in his deposition, that he had the utmost respect and admiration for L Ron Hubbard and the utmost devotion, which is why he had spent those many years of his life working for that person for something like $20 a week. And he had the utmost respect and devotion for Mary Sue Hubbard and for what she stood for, at least as concerns the technology and the preservation thereof. And I was concerned because at the close of that deposition, I knew we needed the knowledge that he would have to have had with that close relationship with L Ron Hubbard, that we would need to use that in this case because we were seeking to compel the testimony of L Ron Hubbard. And I knew that would force a very difficult question upon an individual that had spent that many years working under such a close personal relationship with L Ron Hubbard and under Mary Sue Hubbard. And at the end of that deposition, I said, Ken, I realize what you have been through. I realize you do not like lawsuits, and particularly this suit. I realize, as he reiterated in his deposition, he felt it was very sad that the church is now suing David Mayo, and now David Mayo is forced to defend himself against the church and file a countersuit. Those were his words, very, very sad. He says, I understand your feelings about this, but would you be willing to come out to California and do a deposition for me to establish the relationship of L Ron Hubbard to the corporate entities known as the Church of Scientology? And he thought about it for a while, and he says, what time do you want me there? Last Monday, we spent approximately 8 hours in a deposition with Mr. Urquhart. His testimony is absolutely flawless. It is down to the last detail. If any of you are concerned or want to know about what it was like to be L Ron Hubbard's communicator and be on the ship in the 60s, Dave is laughing because he feels he already knows. You can read Ken Urquhart's deposition. That deposition will help the position of the defendants in this case immeasurably. I have nothing but the deepest gratitude and respect for Mr. Urquhart for his personal effort to help the defendants in this case by standing up for what he knew was the truth, regardless of the outcome. And I wish you'd give him a nice hand, too. Ron Hubbard, I'm informed, once indicated after he'd had some problems in the country of Rhodesia and he returned to England, he told a group of his followers and supporters that one OT cannot do it alone. And I think truer words were never spoken. I don't know that he felt that I would be addressing this group in this particular fashion when he made that statement. But certainly it is a true and correct and very quotable statement. And if you think about it, one OT did not do it alone when the Church of Scientology was founded and when the Church of Scientology was built. It took people like David Mayo and Dee Dee Riesdorf and Ken Urquhart and Maud Castillo and Sarge Gerbode and the others. I mean, it's too many for me to reiterate now. And many, many faces I see, Homer Schomer, in the room tonight, remind me of that commitment to the church. But there was a higher commitment, and that is to the truth and integrity of the technology, not simply blind loyalty to a corporate institution that had lost its path toward the technology. I think that's why this group is here. That's why the Advanced Ability Center was founded. That's why there are other Advanced Ability Centers all over this country. Whether or not they're formally affiliated makes no difference. The commitment is there. There has been a nationwide commitment among the independent field to commit themselves to this case. That's why many of them that were in the church left the church. That's why these individuals founded the organizations which we defend today in this case. And because of that commitment, the commitment to integrity and the commitment to courage, this case will be won. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Mr. David Mayo.
to Don and Harvey and to LRH. And you all have our love.
What I have to say tonight is simply a series of thank yous rather than try to propound anything particularly. But I want to thank the people who made the evening tonight possible. From those who are obvious, like the people who have been up on the stage, those who are less obvious. And there's something unique about the movement that we all represent, and that is that people go about doing things because they believe in them. And we have a group here who put this particular evening on tonight, who doesn't have a very fancy title. They don't have a highly resounding name. They get together on Friday evenings and help to raise funds to defend this case for the sake of the freedom of the tag. They get together on Friday evenings because that happens to be an evening that they have available, and so therefore they're known as the Friday night group. And I appreciate very much the efforts of the Friday night group. And although it's not in a very illustrious title, it's certainly a group of very illustrious people. Many of them aren't here in the room right now because they're out tidying up after the dinner and so on, but you saw them in attendance tonight, parking cars and waiting on tables and so on. Those are the people who put together this event tonight. And I want to thank them very much. And Marsha, who's in the back of the room here. So Marsha and various others in the Friday night group helped put this dinner together tonight and have done a number of other events which we appreciate very much because it makes it possible for all this to go on. And there are people here from various parts of California and some from out of the state. At least I think there are some from out of the state. Yeah, I just spotted 2 or 3 from out of the state. I knew there were people here from out of state. Anyway, there are a large number of people who have contributed a lot, not just in terms of coming to the dinner, but also in terms of support, and particularly the support of the nature of believing in and helping us in the commitment that we have in keeping the tech going. When I say the commitment that we have, I'm speaking on behalf of all of the staff at the centre, at the AAC here, and other AACs and other independent people all over the world, because the only reason why people are auditing and training others outside of the church is because they believe in it and other people believe in it too and want them to continue doing it. And it's the support of the people who want that auditing and training that makes it possible for us to do this. And this isn't just a group of people here in California, but a group of people all over the world who are very actively supporting the idea of keeping this independent movement going. In a couple of weeks or so, there is a convention in Europe, in Switzerland, which is a European convention of independent Scientologists. And they're going to have a convention in Europe to celebrate the fact that they have what they call a free zone in Europe. Having just lived through the last World War more closely than what perhaps we have, I think they appreciate it even more than possibly what we do here, or on a more personal level than what we do here. Not that they appreciate the tech more, but they appreciate the fact of being able to live and operate in a free zone as compared to a controlled or oppressive zone, possibly more than what, on a more closer basis than what we do. Not that I'm minimizing our love of freedom too, but I think that's going to be a very significant convention in Europe. We've heard that various activities that have been going on here in the States of a harassive nature have ceased in Europe. And I think that's partly because of their efforts, and I think it's partly because of the efforts of people here in America too. Because I think here in America we've tended to, I'm getting very basso here. That was very good wine. It was the red, not the white. Basso. If we were in a church deposition, we would clear that word for the next 30 to 40 minutes. And if I may digress slightly, I went to a deposition of my own, and sometimes I've sat in on other depositions, and I've had the good fortune to see Gary Bright, our attorney in action, representing us in these depositions. And that's an experience that I think that, you know, it's well worth having a deposition to see, isn't it? So if you get a notice for a deposition, you get to realize also, hey, you get to see Mr. Bright in action. You also get to see Mr. Yanni in action, and that's very reassuring. But when they were taking Julie's deposition, they spent some time clearing definitions. I think there's something that says that misunderstoods cause people to blow off, and I think they were trying to get us to realize something. Anyway, they cleared the word dynamic and eighth dynamic and overt and something about continuous overts and that sort of thing, and then asked Julie a series of questions which probably weren't really evaluative. But at least one got the idea that by not being a member of the Orthodox C of S, that one might be committing a continuous overt against the eighth dynamic. And I remember Gary objecting, I think on the grounds of relevancy, and I think on where was this leading to. If I remember correctly, I think he said something about where is this leading to. And Mr. Yanni said, well, we're waiting to see if she'll have a cognition. And Warren McShane, who is a member of the board of directors of RTC, sort of smiled and nodded knowingly. Anyway, I think Julie had already had the cognition earlier, had ceased committing overt or continuous overts against the eighth dynamic, and that's why she's, you know, auditing in the independent field today, I would imagine. I was asked a few questions in my deposition about the similarity between Scientology and Christianity and various other religions and so on. And while we generally like to keep these sort of things light, there is something that's been coming up which I feel has been missing over the years. And while we've talked about the eighth dynamic, and there has been a definition for the eighth dynamic, I think to a large degree the very idea of an eighth dynamic, and a seventh dynamic for that matter, has been negated in the philosophy that we've been supporting. So while I came up here tonight to thank the people who have helped in this lawsuit and are helping us to forward this movement, such as Gary Bright and the people whose depositions have been taken, the people who have contributed to the Legal Defence Fund, the Friday Night Group, all independent people everywhere, whether they're auditors or whether they're PCs or students or whatever capacity they are, people who have supported this by agreeing that this is the way it should be. I'd simply like to end this off tonight by suggesting that possibly it isn't just a matter of the infinite or some nebulous and generalized thing, but I think there really is a seventh dynamic and an eighth dynamic, and maybe that's why we're doing all of this. Thank you.
Thank you, David, and thank you all for coming. Good night.